The alien council chamber was silent, save for the faint hum of machines monitoring the progress of the human warship. Alien officers moved across the observation deck, their advanced minds struggling to understand what they were witnessing. The humans had been dismissed for decades, their technology seen as primitive, even laughable by galactic standards. But as the human warship appeared on the fringes of their star system, something in the cold expanse of space shifted. At first, it was nothing more than a speck, a grain of dust against the vast black canvas. The Council dismissed the signal at first, but as it grew closer, the sensor readings began to spike. The alien officers exchanged wary glances. Nothing about this was familiar. The ship was moving faster than any human craft should have been capable of. It seemed wrong. "What is it?" one of the alien officers whispered, his voice shaking. "We've detected unusual gravitational fluctuations," another replied, trying to suppress the fear in his tone. Impossible for any known human technology. The council leader, a towering figure in shimmering armor, clenched his fists. "Continue scanning. We cannot afford to make mistakes." The readings were impossible to ignore now. The human warship was not just fast, it was bending the very fabric of space around it. They had never encountered anything like this before. The sensors were showing the impossible. The ship was quantum-locked. Time itself seemed to stretch and twist in its wake, a ripple spreading across the galaxy. The officers now understood. The human warship had the power to freeze entire systems in time, to lock them in a moment, rendering their fleet helpless. "Activate defense protocols," the leader barked. But the words came too late. The humans had already struck. A pulse of energy, sharp and unrelenting, radiated outward from the warship. The alien officers watched in horror as their fleets, vast and numerous, began to freeze. Ships that had once been the pinnacle of galactic might were now suspended in time, their movements grinding to a halt as though caught in an endless, unbroken moment. The hum of the council chamber grew louder, the atmosphere thick with fear. "What is happening?" one officer gasped, unable to comprehend the magnitude of their failure. The entire fleet had been caught in the quantum lock, immobile, helpless. On the human side, the commander stood in a dimly lit room, his face a mask of resolve. He knew what he had to do. He had studied the alien fleets, their movements, their strategies. He had been briefed on the fact that they would never see the humans as a threat, but that had always been the trap. "Activate the cloaking field," he ordered, his voice calm but commanding. "Let them see the consequences of their arrogance." The warship shifted, vanishing from the sensors, cloaked in a field that rendered it invisible even to the most advanced alien detection systems. It was a precaution, something that the humans had perfected through years of clandestine research. The galaxy had underestimated them, but now the humans would show that the underestimation would be their undoing. From the alien observation center, all they saw was a vast, unbroken silence. The ships remained frozen in time, their systems unresponsive. The communication lines went dark. No new orders came in, no signals were transmitted. And then, in the midst of this dead silence, one voice broke through the void. It was cold, impersonal, almost indifferent. "This is humanity. You will surrender or we will make you." The words were simple, but the impact was devastating. Alien officers scrambled to regain control of their fleets, their panic rising as the weight of the situation crushed them. They had no response. They had no way to fight back. On the human side, the commander leaned back in his chair, his fingers tracing the edge of a holographic map. He didn't feel the victory. Not yet. The war had just begun, but the aliens had already lost. The quantum-locked ship had proven that. Now it was only a matter of time before they broke completely. In the alien council, the officers were beginning to break down. They had underestimated the humans, dismissed their strength, their resolve. But now, staring at the quantum-locked warship, they were forced to confront an unthinkable truth. The humans had surpassed them. One alien officer, eyes wide with terror, turned to the council leader. "What do we do? How do we counter this?" The leader's voice was barely a whisper, thick with disbelief. "We don't." The words echoed through the chamber. For the first time in centuries, an alien race had been completely outmatched. And all it had taken was a single ship, a human warship, locked in the power of quantum control. Outside, the warship drifted in the vastness of space, the shimmering energy of its quantum lock flickering like a warning beacon. Silence stretched across the galaxy, broken only by the distant hum of the warship's engines, ready to make its next move. The power shift was undeniable, and it was only just beginning. The silence was overwhelming. The alien council chamber was cold with shock, a frigid tension hanging in the air as the officers processed the magnitude of their situation. The fleet, the pride of their empire, was frozen in time. Not a single ship could move, their weapon systems useless, their communications dead. All of it because of a single human warship. The council leaders' eyes scanned the holographic projections of their fleet, each ship suspended in space like a fragile ornament, frozen in a moment of time. The images flickered as if to remind them of how easily everything had fallen apart. The alien empire, once the rulers of this sector, were now reduced to helpless observers, caught in the grip of a human-made force they couldn't even begin to comprehend. "Are we to remain like this forever?" one officer asked, his voice shaking with fear. The leader stood up, towering over the others, his gaze cold and calculating. "We will not remain in this state long. Our systems are intact. We must counterattack, find a way to break their hold." But deep down, he knew their efforts were futile. The humans had caught them completely off guard. Even their most advanced fleets, built over millennia, were powerless against this human weapon. He turned to another officer. "Is there any way to decipher their technology? Is there any weakness?" The officer, a young and brilliant tactician, was already working furiously at his terminal. He analyzed every available bit of data from their sensors, but nothing he saw gave him any hope. "Sir, I don't believe so. They are using quantum lock technology. This isn't just a weapon, it's an alteration of space-time itself. We cannot track it, we cannot break it." The words hung in the air. The realization settled like a thick, suffocating fog. There was no countermeasure, no defense. This weapon, the human warship, had complete control. For the first time in millennia, the alien empire was vulnerable. Meanwhile, far away, aboard the human warship, the atmosphere was calm. The commander, a seasoned veteran with a reputation for strategic brilliance, stood at the helm. His crew moved like clockwork, efficiently and silently, preparing for the next phase of their operation. The warship, cloaked in near invisibility, hovered just outside the frozen alien fleet, its quantum lock field humming faintly, like a distant heartbeat. The commander could feel the weight of the moment in the pit of his stomach. This wasn't just about the war, this was about sending a message. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for far too long, and this was the moment when that perception would shatter. "Are they still holding?" the commander asked, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of their mission. One of his officers, a scientist who had worked for years on the quantum lock technology, nodded. "Yes, sir. The fleet is completely locked in place. They can't move. They can't fire. Their systems are completely frozen." "Good," the commander said, his voice almost detached. "Prepare to broadcast the message. It's time to make them understand the consequences of their actions." The scientist moved quickly to the communications console, working fast to initiate the broadcast. The commander's thoughts drifted back to the history of humanity, how Earth had been seen as weak, primitive. The galaxy had watched as human. Civilizations fell time after time, but always rose again. They had never been fully crushed. Now they had risen with a vengeance, and this moment would serve as a reminder to the stars that humanity would never be underestimated again. Back in the Alien Council, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Panic was beginning to set in, especially among the younger officers. The older ones, however, were silent, their eyes fixed on the screens, calculating, analyzing, searching for any way to break the hold that the humans had over them. "Can we negotiate with them?" one of the junior officers asked hesitantly. "We may still have some leverage." The council leader turned sharply. "Negotiate with humans after they've done this? Do you not see they've already won?" The younger officer recoiled, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had not yet fully grasped the enormity of their situation. The council leader's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "There is no negotiation now," he said quietly. "There is only survival." On the human side, the broadcast was ready. The commander's hand hovered over the console, ready to press the button that would send their message to the entire galaxy. "Let them hear it," he said coldly. The words began to echo across the stars. "This is humanity. You will surrender, or we will make you." The message was simple, but it carried with it a weight that struck fear into the hearts of the alien officers. The fleet had been defeated before a single shot had been fired, and now they were being told, in no uncertain terms, that their fate rested in the hands of the humans. The message was clear: surrender or face annihilation. The Alien Council was paralyzed by indecision. They had never encountered anything like this. Every protocol they had ever followed, every strategy they had perfected, had been rendered useless in a matter of moments. Their pride, their arrogance, it had all been shattered by a single human warship. "We must prepare for the worst," the council leader said, his voice low but firm. "Prepare for a counterattack in case we can break free of their control." But as he spoke, the reality of their situation became even clearer. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had made the impossible possible. And now the galaxy would have to reckon with the fact that humanity was no longer just a backwater species. They were a force to be reckoned with. The alien officers looked at one another, and in their eyes there was a flicker of fear. Fear, not just of the humans, but of what would come next. On the human warship, the commander stood silently as he observed the alien fleet. He had anticipated their fear, but he had also known that they would not be so easily broken. The alien empire had been built on power and pride, and to ask them to surrender would be a blow to their very identity. But humanity had no such concerns. Earth had known suffering. Earth had known betrayal. And in the cold, vast darkness of space, humanity had found its strength. Now, that strength was being wielded with precision, with purpose, and no empire, no matter how vast or powerful, could stop it. The commander leaned forward, his eyes focused on the fleet of frozen ships. He knew that this was just the beginning, the first chapter of a new era for humanity. The alien empire had been a symbol of power, of invincibility, but now humanity had proven that the galaxy could be theirs. One ship at a time. "We've won this battle," the commander muttered to himself, a faint smile crossing his face. "But the war is just beginning." The alien fleet hung motionless in the void of space, suspended in the eerie stillness created by the human warship's quantum lock technology. Nothing moved. The systems that had once hummed with the power of advanced alien technology were now dead, frozen in time. Inside the alien council chamber there was nothing but the buzz of anxious murmurs, the sharp contrast to the calm, confident atmosphere aboard the human warship. Alien officers stood stiffly, their eyes flicking over to their leader. The once proud empire had become a shattered vessel of panic and fear. They had expected a quick victory, a fleeting skirmish that would reinforce their dominance. Instead, they had found themselves caught in a trap they could not escape. "We can't stay like this forever," one of the senior officers said, his voice filled with rising frustration. "This technology, it's not just a weapon, it's a godsend. There's no way we can break free unless they choose to release us." The council leader turned to face him, his expression cold and distant, though his mind churned with the weight of their failure. "We cannot rely on their mercy. We must break free ourselves." "How?" The officer's voice was incredulous. "Our weapons, our ships, everything is frozen. We are completely helpless." The council leader took a deep breath, his gaze scanning the holographic map that now displayed their immobilized fleet. "We will find a way." His words, however, lacked conviction. The reality was clear. The alien empire, so sure of its superiority, had been outclassed by humanity, a species once seen as insignificant. Across the vastness of space, the human commander stood at the bridge of his warship, watching as the alien fleet remained suspended in time. The victory was, in many ways, anticlimactic. No shots had been fired, no blood had been spilled. The enemy had surrendered without ever understanding the true power they were facing. The commander had seen it coming. The underestimation of Earth had always been humanity's greatest strength. He knew that the aliens would never have believed that such a weapon could exist, let alone be wielded by humans. But even as the thought crossed his mind, he felt a deep sense of unease. This wasn't a time for celebration. "Not yet. Report," he said, his voice steady but with a trace of something darker beneath the surface. He didn't need to look at the officer's face to know that their victory was not as absolute as it seemed. "The fleet is locked in place, sir. The quantum lock technology is holding them," the officer said, but there was a tremor in his voice. "But we've detected something strange. It seems like they are trying to break free, though their systems are still inactive. I don't know how, but they're attempting to override the lock." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Are they trying to hack the quantum lock?" "It's possible, sir. They have advanced tech, although nothing on the scale of ours. But they may still be able to force something." The commander turned to the map. The alien fleet was trapped, yes, but that did not mean they were out of options. The possibility of the aliens regaining control was real, and that made the situation far more dangerous. The commander's job was far from over. There was no guarantee that their victory would be permanent. They needed to solidify their control before the alien forces had a chance to regroup. "We need to ensure the lock is secure. If they break free, we're back to square one," the commander ordered. "Prepare to initiate Phase 2. A pause followed as the officers processed his words. Phase 2 had been the contingency plan, developed in the event that the alien fleet did indeed try to resist. It was a harsher approach, one that would leave the aliens with no hope of escaping the human warship's grasp. The officer nodded, moving to execute the order. Meanwhile, aboard the alien flagship, the atmosphere was charged with mounting desperation. Officers scrambled to execute every protocol, every command, in the hopes of breaking the stifling lock on their fleet. Despite their best efforts, nothing worked. Their best engineers tried, using every possible method of counteraction, but they couldn't even touch the human ship's technology. It was a complete mismatch, and it gnawed at the very core of the alien psyche. "What do we do now?" another officer said, almost pleading. "We have no weapons left. We can't break free, and we can't fight back," the council leader finally allowed himself a moment of visible frustration. He had fought for years to maintain the might of his empire. They had conquered worlds, eradicated civilizations that had dared to defy them. But now, standing in the cold of space with their fleet completely locked in place, he realized that this was more than a military defeat. It was a death sentence for their entire civilization. His eyes flicked to a younger officer, one who had been an enthusiastic supporter of the Council's aggressive tactics. The officer had been full of fire, full of the belief that their superiority would carry them to victory every time. But now the officer looked hollow, a shadow of the self-assured warrior he had once been. "Why didn't we prepare for this?" the officer asked softly, more to himself than anyone else. "Why didn't we see them coming?" The council leader's voice was low, almost as if the words weighed him down. "We couldn't have. They were nothing, just humans. How could we have known?" His voice trailed off, but the bitter truth was evident to everyone in the room. The humans had defied all expectations. They had been underestimated, just as Earth had always been, by the Council, by the galaxy at large, and now they were paying the price. On the human warship, the commander stood silently as the report came in. The alien fleet was still attempting to break free, but the quantum lock was holding strong. Phase 2 was about to begin. He could feel the shift in the air, the gravity of the situation pressing down on him. This wasn't just a victory. It wasn't about crushing an enemy. It was about sending a message, one that would echo across the galaxy for centuries to come. Humanity was no longer to be underestimated. He turned to face his officers, all of them staring at him with the same understanding in their eyes. They knew what came next. The aliens had been given a choice to surrender. And now that they had failed to accept it, the human warship would do what had to be done. "Activate Phase 2, the commander ordered. The hum of the warship's systems changed as the crew set to work. There was no hesitation, no second thoughts. The alien empire had brought this upon itself. As the countdown began, the commander took one last look at the holographic map of the alien fleet. The ships remained motionless, locked in place. But that would not last for long. Not if humanity had anything to say about it, and humanity would have the final word. The countdown echoed through the cold metal corridors of the human warship, each second stretching like an eternity. The alien fleet remained frozen in space, caught in the unyielding grip of the quantum lock technology. The tension aboard the warship was palpable, but it was not fear. It was the quiet anticipation of a final act, a statement to the galaxy that humanity would never again be dismissed or underestimated. In the alien flagship, the atmosphere was one of frantic desperation. The officers had long since exhausted all options for breaking free. They had failed. Their systems were crippled, their fleets immobilized. And now, the cold realization that there was nothing left but to surrender sank in deeper. The council leader stood at the front of the bridge, staring into the cold vacuum of space. His eyes were distant, filled with the bitter sting of defeat. This was the end, not just for their fleet, but for their empire. For the first time in his life, he felt powerless, not because of the humans, but because of his own failure to prepare for the unimaginable. Their arrogance had led them to this point. And now, there was nothing left to do but accept the inevitable. "We have no choice," the council leader muttered, his voice hollow. "We will surrender." The officers around him nodded in solemn agreement, their faces grim with the knowledge of what that meant. They had once been the conquerors, the supreme beings in the galaxy. Now they were reduced to supplicants, at the mercy of a single human ship. "Send the signal," the council leader ordered, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The fleet's final act was to acknowledge the human command, to admit defeat. Back aboard the human warship, the commander stood tall, watching the frozen fleet on his screens. He felt no joy in this moment, no celebration. The battle had been won without a single shot fired, but that didn't make the victory sweet. The aliens had been given a chance, an opportunity to surrender before things escalated. They had refused, and now they had paid the price. But even now, as the alien fleet sent the surrender signal, the commander couldn't shake the feeling that this moment wasn't truly over. The war was won, but the message would last far longer. Humanity had proven itself to the galaxy, and the commander understood that this would not be the last time they would need to defend themselves or remind the universe of humanity's resilience. He turned to his officer, who had been monitoring the alien fleet's communications. "Are they transmitting?" "Yes, sir," the officer replied, his fingers flying over the console. "The alien fleet is acknowledging defeat. Their commander has sent the signal." The commander nodded, his eyes never leaving the screen. "And our message? It's been received by their entire fleet," the officer confirmed. "The galaxy knows now." The commander let out a slow breath. The battle was over, but the war, his war, was never truly about this one fleet. It was about securing Earth's place in the galaxy. It was about showing the aliens that they had been wrong to think they could erase humanity with ease. They had misjudged the humans, and now they would understand the true cost of that miscalculation. The final act was simple. As the alien fleet drifted, locked in place by the quantum lock, the human warship slowly disengaged its cloak, revealing its full might. The alien ships, still frozen in time, remained at its mercy. The commander knew that they would not fire, that they would not continue this fight. There was no need for violence anymore. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's power, and the galaxy would remember it. The commander's gaze softened, and he gave the final order, "Release the lock," he said quietly. The hum of the warship systems shifted as the quantum lock technology powered down. The alien fleet, still suspended in space, was slowly allowed to resume its motion. But the warship did not engage. There would be no further bloodshed, no final strike. The message had been delivered. The alien fleet began to drift away, their ships moving sluggishly, their crews in shock. They had surrendered, but the toll of their defeat was far greater than any loss of ships. They had been broken, not by force, but by the realization that they had underestimated a species they had once considered insignificant. And now, in the silence of space, the truth of humanity's strength was undeniable. Back on Earth, the victory would be celebrated, but it would not be the end. There would always be more battles, more challenges to face. The commander knew this, but today, humanity had proven that no one, no matter how vast or evolved, could ever take them for granted again. As the warship turned and made its way back to Earth, the commander looked out at the stars. The dark expanse of space stretched out before him. He wasn't a hero, he was a soldier, and this was the beginning of humanity's place among the stars. The war was over for now, but humanity's message had been received, and it would echo across the galaxy for generations to come.